So basically, Risk Management Association is an NGO engaged in the promotion of risk management culture in India. The basic objective of our association is to promote awareness about risk management and insurance, and act as a platform for insurance professionals, bankers, corporates to share their experience, thoughts for betterment of the industry. We also encourage research and development in this field and provide courses and webinars in risk management and allied areas. Here is a list of our governing council members. This body was started way back in 1992 by Mr. R.J. Agrawala. And since then, this association has come a long way. We have with us Professor Abhijit Chaturaj, who is the chartered insurer and chairperson insurance program at BIMTech. And he has been associated with us since inception. Then we have Mr. Sanjoy Kumar, who is a certified risk professional and IRM India ambassador. We also have Mr. KL Naik, who is an authority in reinsurance. And he has authored more than 5 books on reinsurance. We also have a very strong advisory council. We have Mr. Kamalji Sahai, ex-MD, Star Union, Mr. B.D. Banerjee, ex-CMD, Oriental Insurance, Mr. G. Srinivasan, ex-CMD, New India and current director, NIA Pune, Mr. K.K. Mishra, ex-CMD, Tata AIG, and a lot of other senior people from the industry. We also have a lot of experts from different segments, insurance, banking, corporate, who are associated with us. We also offer a number of membership criteria, membership to our number of memberships, ranging from student to fellow. And we have, in corporate member, we have a lot of members, but notably BIMTech, and BIMTech is playing a very credible role in promoting education and awareness, along with Dalmia Bharat Cement, Mr. Surat Mukherjee. So we have created a knowledge center at our portal where people can log in and access to resources related to risk management, insurance, various reports, certification. Last year, we conducted a technical research. So where we received a lot of responses, and we published this book from the winners of the contest. Last year, we also organized a risk management seminar at Mumbai, which was quite successful with participation of more than 250 people from cross-section of the industry. And we also published this quarterly bulletin. Again, we are into this field of insurance education for now more than 40 years. So the initial, our group publication, this Insurance Times, was the first journal on insurance in India. And we have a magazine on life insurance too. So we also have 2 knowledge portals on insurance and banking. So you can anytime access for more detailed info.
So, good afternoon, all webinar viewers, and from both India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, and whichever part of the world who are joining it. We'll be talking today about transforming health insurance and health system post-COVID pandemic. I have a very interesting and distinguished panel members today with me. The first member is Dr. Narottam Puri. He will not be able to join live because of some technical problem, but he will connect on con call live little later. But let me introduce him. Dr. Puri has 52 years medicine. Is in medicine, currently advisor, health services, medical value travel. He is also advisor of FICCI Health Services, advisor, medical operations chairman, Fortis Medical Council, and emeritus consultants Fortis. He played key initiatives in FICCI, including development of national standard treatment guidelines for the ministry and standardization of health insurance. He is independent director with Cigna TTK General Life Health Insurance Company Limited. But more than that, Dr. Narottam Puri is a well-known cricket commentator. We all youngsters, when we were youngsters, we grew up listening to his mellifluous voice over Doordarshan years. So that's another introduction of him. I have another very distinguished member, panelist, Dr. Nishant Jain. Dr. Jain is currently working as program director with the German Development Corporation Agency. He is considered an international thought leader in the field of health system, health financing. I will ask Dr. Jain to switch on his video so that if you can just raise your hand, people will. As I was saying, he is considered an international thought leader in the field of health system, health financing, health insurance, and he is advising government of various countries in South Asia, Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa on design and implementation of universal health coverage and health insurance program. Dr. Jain has been associated with RSBI. He is also associated with Ayushman Bharat. Dr. Jain has his doctorate in health finance from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He is a postgraduate in chemistry, and also, very interestingly, he has his MA in music. So welcome, Mr. Jain, for this webinar. Next panelist is Mr. Sanjay Datta, Chief Underwriting and Claims with, I request Mr. Datta to switch on his, yes, sir. Thank you so much. So Mr. Datta is a very well-known name and very quoted extensively by all the leading newspapers in India for his views in health insurance. He is a stalwart in the field of general insurance and has experience and insight in the field that can feed the curiosity of professionals for generations to come. He has been with ICICI Lombard right from the day one, and he takes pride in myriad of roles he has essayed to perfection, be it the customer service head for all product lines of the business, operational excellence, product development, pricing across wholesale, retail production, or underwriting. His passion and passion for quality service delivery is what makes him a leader to reckon with. Welcome, Mr. Datta, for this webinar. And of course, we have a veteran with us, Dr. C.H. Ansari, and he brings to table a rarely found.
Asrani. That is Asrani, not Ansari.
Sorry, I'm sorry, so sorry. I correct myself. Dr. C.H. Asrani brings to table a rarely found combination of active clinical practice over 42 years, insurance domain experience over 20 years, training of doctors and insurance professionals for over 20 years. He's founder and CEO of INCHEAS, where his team pioneered the concept of medical audit and insurance in India in 2010. Currently in his second stint as senior consultant Work Bank for capacity building and medical audit for Ayushman Bharat's world's largest and ambitious mass health insurance scheme. Welcome, Dr. Asrani, for this webinar. So let me start this webinar with trying to make you understand what exactly India's healthcare system is. And India's healthcare system, unfortunately, suffers from fragmented care and inverse care. What I mean by inverse care is that people whose healthcare needs are most are deprived of healthcare. People whose healthcare needs are less, they consume more healthcare. And that is the reason healthcare in India is extremely inverse. The other problem with healthcare in India is that it is extremely hospital centric and specialty centric, or what we call curative care centric. In the process, it forgets all other cares, particularly the preventive care and the promotive care. That's the problem. Health insurance in India has been doing very well. I'm reminded of the old days when Mediclaim policies started, and that's how health insurance started in India. Today, health insurance is in much better shape, but many things are expected from health insurance. I will straight away start the conversation by asking Mr. Sanjay Datta, because he handles health insurance in India's largest non-life private sector health insurance company. What exactly is the problem of COVID? Is it covered with the health insurance policies that is normally issued? Uh, that's one. And how are you going to tackle this? Do you think the reinsurance program that you have at the moment is that good enough, or do you think parametric care is something? Parametric insurance is something that is required to handle it, or do we require health pandemic risk pool? These are the three options. I would like to have your views on these three. You,
Audio.
audio.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Chatraj, for your kind introduction. I'm very happy to be on this panel, and thank you very much to all the participants who spared their valuable time to be part of this discussion. It's an important discussion, and going straight to the questions that you asked. One of the key, most important point I would like to make, for everyone here is health insurance in India. The policies which we have given, you started with the word Mediclaim. It has evolved over the periods and the last 20 years, and we have a plethora of health insurance companies in India with plethora of products which are have evolved from them, like health Mediclaim. But the basic product, which is the driving product in India, is the health indemnity product, which actually reimburses cost of care for anyone who wants to access health care. And that happens to be structured on the curative care, which he talked about, which basically visits to hospitals. And obviously, yes, it does cover any kind of, hospital admission, which is related to COVID. Is of course covered, including the fact that even quarantines in hospitals would be covered under this product. Those who have, the slight beginnings of outpatient coverage in some of our products, and of course, treatment outside the hospital, in mild form at home, or just, the reimbursement of doctor or, testing charges would of course be covered as part of outpatient coverages. But having said that, coming back to, the issue of how is the insurance industry geared to handle this, I would say with regulatory support and the whole, we are part of this entire social initiative, government-led social initiative to be able to support this whole pandemic outbreak and be able to contain it as much as possible. Our part of the journey is to be able to support it when the expenses are going to be incurred for large-scale, hospital treatment. If and when it happens in large scale, we only hope that the numbers are not too high. But having said that, we are all geared to handle it. And even in the lockdown situation, I think just to reassure everyone that we are geared to handle that. Most of the insurance companies have, kind of morphed to be able to handle all the requirements for admission in terms of approvals. From a work from home scenario, that's the big part, which is one of the most heartening parts of this entire, readiness. But moving on to the whole question of readiness in terms of being able to provide coverage in large scale for all the claims which may occur in case the numbers move to the to the worst case scenarios. We must say that yes, as an industry, we are all geared. There is some of us, including us, have some reinsurance coverage. But having said that, reinsurance coverage, for pandemic on the health side, pandemic issues are not as prevalent as the catastrophic covers which we have for flood and earthquake. Very limited coverage available. So everyone, if at all people have it, it's very, very limited. And so that's the first part. So that's that. To that extent, I think the industry would be would most necessarily put most of its bill themselves, as in each company would put its own bill. And coming to the last question, I think we as an industry would like to look at going ahead. This is not the it's not the time we can just get together and form a pandemic pool or something. There is some thoughts around this, not only here but worldwide. It's an interesting thought which is coming through both on the health side as well as on the economic side, in terms of interruption which with the situations led to businesses. A lot of businesses got interrupted. They are suffering business interruption losses. Both on both the sides, there's some initial thoughts and requirements from customers coming through in terms of pandemic pool. I could talk about that later as we go along. Thank you.
Is the parametric coverage a solution for this?
Yes, yes, no. If we do not find enough coverage to be able to back such a concept as a pandemic pool, there would be a requirement for parametric coverage, which is basically triggered on the fact that once an event occurs, and it has to be very, very well-defined event, basis that certain payouts happen without any question to how much cost has been incurred by the end customer. If event trigger happens, and basis that trigger, certain payouts happen. It could happen to various segments. It could also happen these kind of pandemic covers with parametric solutions are available to disaster relief kind of funds. So there have been talks that the NDRF and other government bodies, state government themselves, may look at such coverages. It could be designed, and there is some thought around parametric coverage to be given later as we go down the line.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Datta. Now move on to Mr. Dr. Nishant Jain. One of the problems of India's health system is that it is stricken by multiple fragmentations of payer, fragmentation of risk pool, deep fragmentation of providers of healthcare services, and also of the digital backbone running it. How can it be synthesized? Do you think Ayushman Bharat is taking care of this?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Dr. Abhijit, and thanks for the invitation to be part of this very interesting webinar. So regarding your question, so what is happening in India, that yes, there's huge fragmentation, and not only between public and private, but also within public also there is a lot of fragmentation. There are a lot of schemes from Government of India, from state governments, from various ministries, various departments, and most of those schemes run on their own IT platform, some without any IT platform, and they have different definitions, they have different set of hospital. So yes, fragmentation was a huge challenge, and one of the objective of Ayushman Bharat was to work on this fragmentation and create a system where we can bring a lot of these kind of schemes together. So what has happened that in Ayushman Bharat, for example, that there were almost 24 to 26 states were running their own health insurance schemes before Ayushman Bharat was launched. And the majority of those schemes have now been converged on Ayushman Bharat platform to a large extent. So in large number of states, it has been converged completely. In many other states, it has been converged partially, and the efforts are going on to converge it completely. Also, discussions are going on, and already some work has started to converge with schemes like ESI, Employee State Insurance, which is for the formal sector workers. So already there is a pilot which has started to share the hospitals of both the schemes together. And similarly with some other schemes also, this convergence initiatives are going on. So the idea is basically that ultimately we have standard definitions of things. We have standard definitions, standard protocols, standard packages and rates. These kind of things can be done, and the IT backbone can also be standardized. So in fact, what Ayushman Bharat has done now, that it has offered its IT platform even to other government schemes so that they can come together and they can do things in a more cohesive way. And things like, even for example, monitoring and evaluation, dashboards, fraud control, all these things can be done in a standardized way, irrespective of which scheme it is and who is the payer. And that is where I think the importance of this kind of scheme will come. And in fact, in the next phase of the Ayushman Bharat IT platform, which we are calling IT 2.0, when it will be launched in a year or so, it can also offer a platform for the private industry to use that IT platform to run. And that is something which also will be offered and which will be open to everybody. So the idea is that we bring more standardization, we bring more convergence, but at the same time, schemes can continue to have their own independent identity and they can work the way they want to work. Thank you.
What about fragmentation of providers? 80% providers have less than 10 medical staff or other staffs, and how that fragmentation can be stopped or can be addressed?
See, fragmentation of provider is a completely different challenge. And also in India, as you know, that private sector is very important. Almost more than 2/3 of the care is provided by the private sector. And majority of the beds are also in the private sector. Doctors are working there. So we need to actually see that how that can be brought together. And in the private sector also, there's a huge heterogeneity. So there's a large number of small nursing homes which are run by doctors, husband, wife, and these kind of things. And there are few big hospitals and big chains also. So the challenge of fragmentation in the provider market is much more difficult for the government also to engage effectively with the private sector, because if there is no way to talk to each of them, then you have to meet each of them and talk to each of them separately. There is no way that there is a group or association with whom you can talk and you can actually negotiate things. So there are some, but a large number of providers are still out of it, and that's where the challenge is. So how do we bring that? And another kind of problem also is that the same provider may be impaneled for 5 different schemes, and they are charging different rate from different schemes. Even within the same private sector, depending on your capacity to negotiate, different rates are being paid right now. And I think those are the things on which a lot of work has started happening, and much more needs to happen.
I'll come back to that issue a little later. I now move on to Dr. Asrani. And Doctor, the healthcare system, as you know, at this particular hour has been stretched and is being stretched also. All of a sudden, we have started feeling that we have shortages of doctors, nurses, paramedics in days to come. Now, some of the question that I want to understand from you is that how the government of India is going to fulfill the challenges of shortages of doctor in days to come. One which Dr. Devi Sethi quoted, I read from that: mortality in COVID-19 is directly proportional to ICU beds. Thus, mortality in Germany is 0.3%, almost like seasonal flu, while mortality in Italy is 9.26%. It is because Germany has 29 ICU beds per 1 lakh citizen, Italy has 1.3, and India has 2.3. So this is the scenario. And he also says that our government is capable of commissioning 2,000 bed ICUs in every city in less than 2 weeks and ramping up the entire ventilator production locally, or if required, importing it from other countries. India has the privilege of large government hospitals, medical college hospitals with well-spaced bed. All is needed is piped oxygen and suction, which can be done in 2 weeks' time. What is missing, however, is the doctor, nurses, and paramedics. So, Dr. Asrani, I would like to understand how will this problem be sorted out?
Thank you, Professor Jatoraj, for first inviting me here and then asking this question. Indian primary care practice actually never had nurses. In Western world, the family care practice, there is a nurse in every clinic, or maybe there are 2 nurses in every clinic. The Indian GP was the largest one-man industry. Most of the consultants, physicians practicing in private sector do not have nurses. So we have created nurses only for the tertiary care hospitals. even the secondary care hospitals are having private nurses, many of them just trained there only without any certification. So I think this pandemic is going to open up a lot of new vistas of short-term nursing courses for doctors. Like see today, a doctor can do a ACLS, Advanced Cardiac Life Care Support System, the cardiopulmonary resuscitation, 2 days, 3 days course. I think short courses for doctors to learn how to run ventilator will be started. There is a step down ventilator called as BiPAP, which can even be taught to the patient. So we will have to have a lot of production to make these BiPAPs and ventilators cost effective, and then teach people how to monitor them. Yes, to put in a ventilator, I need an intensivist or an anesthetist or a respiratory physician. But to monitor a ventilator, even an MBBS or a trained non-MBBS doctor can be relied upon. So I think it is going to change the ecosystem totally.
My question is, medical education is extremely costly these days. Only the sons of rich people can go for it. In your time, doctor, things were very, very different. With lesser meager means also, you could have pursued a medical education. Why is it? Why government is not coming up, opening up medical colleges for meritorious students, even coming from not so privileged family? Look at what happens. This Super 30 in Patna. IIT engineers are coming out from rickshawala's son and other very, very poor family. But when it comes to medical science, it's extremely costly. And as I said, people from the middle class family also will not be able to afford it. What can be done to correct it? What Medical Council of India should do or Government of India should do to address this problem?
See, when I did my medical education, although it was early 70s, my tuition fee was 75 rupees per term. My hostel fees was 75 rupees per term, and the whole fees was paid back to me in my 1 year internship. Today, 80% medical colleges are private. They're not in public sector. So what is happening is there is huge amount of investment going, although capitation fee on namesake is not there, the fees are exorbitant. What I feel we should follow the model of Russia. Hospitals have a lot of beds. They have enough number of patients. I think it's time to take a teaching center away from the hospital where you conduct classes and bring people back to the hospital for seeing patients. The private hospitals do not have enough patients to learn from. But public hospitals have a lot of patients. They do not have classroom and the investment is not coming in. Somewhere a public-private partnership has to begin even in this sector.
Thank you.
Dr. Puri, welcome to this webinar. And the first question that I'd like to ask you, we have been associated with Indian healthcare and health insurance for many years, close to 40 years as an ace doctor and a keen strategist. Tell our viewers, how would the current strike of COVID would impact the Indian healthcare?
Thank you, Dr. Abhijit. It's a pleasure being on this webinar. This is not a good time. I don't think it's a good time for healthcare delivery, healthcare insurance, in fact, for any industry, nor is it a good time for the countries, the world.
Right, sir.
The pandemic is affecting each and every pore, each and every constituent, and it's really after more than 100 years after the Spanish flu that the entire world is feeling really helpless because we don't have a solution as to what we can do to contain or control it. So I think healthcare industry in India or health insurance industry in India cannot be insulated from what is happening around the world.
Dr. Puri, it is imperative now that the Indian healthcare has to change drastically. post-COVID. Is it not the time to embolden our preventive primary care and disease management?
Absolutely correct. I don't think the policymakers have ever had any other thoughts. The problem has always lain in implementing it. As far back as 1943, Sir Dhore Committee had sat down. At that time, India was not independent, but that subsequently was ratified by the independent India as well, by the Parliament.
Right.
The Dhore Commission had very clearly laid out the groundwork, done the groundwork and laid out the plan as to the fundamental basis of how the healthcare system in the country would be formed and run. Unfortunately, from 1943 to date, that hasn't changed much. The emphasis on primary and preventive healthcare in a country such as India has to be the way forward. That is realized. Ayushman Bharat was the first attempt, I think, towards a universal health scheme. It was also the first attempt, in my opinion, as to the government ultimately understanding that it is not possible for it to continue to provide all forms of the care to the people, and they will have to involve the private sector. And therefore, this Ayushman Bharat allowed the private sector to participate in it. Now, the reason why it has not succeeded to the extent that it should, from the perspective of private sector participation, is a different matter of debate. But suffice it to say that I am totally in agreement with you that the way forward for this country has always been, and it has been re-emphasized by this epidemic, must lie in preventive and primary health care.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Dr. Puri, you have been also associated with the health insurance industry as independent director of Manipal Sigma Health Insurance, also a former executive director with Max Bupa. To what extent do you think health insurance business has been affected due to COVID? There is cases of huge bills. I would like to have your perspective from healthcare delivery side.
Well, first of all, a correction. I was with executive director with Max Healthcare, not with Max Bupa.
Right.
But yes, I am an independent director on the board of Manipal Sigma.
Right.
I think the important point from the healthcare delivery side of the current scenario is so dismal that a recent FICCI EY report has painted a picture, I think correctly. It shows that the quarterly losses are to the tune of something like 13 to 22,000 crores. And for an industry which was not in the pink of health, with an EBITDA margin hovering around 13% or so, this is a very, very bad scene. The reasons are threefold. First of all, the footfalls have fallen, partly because of fear,
Yes.
partly because of the fact that the lockdown and containment zones have not allowed the person to travel unless it is an emergency. And majority of the hospitals rely on elective surgeries and outpatient work. Emergency surgeries account for much less.
Right.
The second main reason is that there is zero traffic for medical tourism.
Right, sir. Right.
And the third is the cost factor.
Right.
That now to deliver whatever care was being delivered
Right.
now requires an additional expense of the personal protective equipment, gloves, masks, etc., goggles, etc., which is an added cost to the inventory. And last but not the least is the fact that the hospitals, partly because of humanitarian reasons, partly because of business reasons, cannot afford to let go. So hospitals are functioning at full capacity from the point of view of staffing, etc. But the number of people utilizing the same services have fallen. So these four factors, I think, have contributed massively to a situation where we are now focusing on somehow pulling through 1 month after the other in an ability to be able to pay bills. That by itself is becoming a huge challenge. So I think we are in very bad shape, and we have petitioned the government for a bailout of some nature, or we have identified the areas where we think the government can step in to help us. But the fact of the matter is that if we are not getting the patient's health insurance, won't get the premium, the patients either.
Right.
So I think we are sisters as far as both health insurance and health delivery systems are so heavily intertwined that they can only be called as siblings. And I think it's just unfortunate that health delivery is so badly affected at the present moment that it will take quite a while for it to recover. And it will require a huge effort and hopefully an answer to the COVID pandemic before we reach a stage of some kind of semblance at least of stability in the health sector.
Do you think post-COVID people will go for more health insurance in days to come?
That's a very good question, and I've been pondering on that. My feeling is yes, people will. There is no greater inducement to human endeavor than fear. And this COVID pandemic has instilled a fear which is unprecedented in the minds of the general populace. And it's also a fact that when people are afraid, particularly of the elderly age group above the age of 50 and with comorbidities, and India is full of comorbidities, then they will be really worried as to how are they going to pay their bills. My feeling is that going forward, a larger number of middle-class Indians will seek health insurance than was the case earlier. It is a very ironical and in a way pathetic situation that COVID might well act as an advertisement for the health insurance industry in India in future.
My last question is that what is most health insurance company do not really look up for the geriatric healthcare needs. They do have policies, but unfortunately those policies are not as per the geriatric healthcare needs. And the healthcare institution also remains the same, that is hospitals. Most policies triggers because of hospitalization. Do you think home care and palliative care has a great future in India, and they should be embedded into a health insurance policy in days to come?
Yes, I think certain moves have been made over a period of time by IRDA in relaxing what were otherwise very, very strict norms. And anybody over the age of 60 really had no recourse to any kind of a policy. But now, with the liberalization of some of the rules, you at least have some kind of an option available for at least 65 years easily. And beyond that also, in certain cases, particularly if you have already carrying your insurance for a certain period of time. I mean, there are certain riders, but ideally what should happen and what has happened in Ayushman Bharat, for example, is that pre-existing disease and age do not have a barrier. Ideally, in an ideal world, that is how it must be. The problem is that in India, we have not had a very large populace getting insured. How will insurance industry survive if the healthier number does not override the number from the point of view of those who are seeking it?
Okay, right.
So otherwise, it's never going to make sense from a business perspective to have an insurance company running if everybody was claiming. I mean, you can't have a situation like in motor vehicle insurance or in earlier days of health insurance, where
So-
110, 112, 20% was the utilization, and the intake was actually being supported by other insurance companies, other insurances bailing out the health insurance. That cannot be the way forward.
Right.
But you're absolutely correct in your assumption. In going forward, we will need to factor in both home care as well as geriatric care. I think we are on the right track because, as you see, going one step at a time, IRDA has brought in certain liberalization. Now you have a standard policy, you have specialist policies available for cancer,
Right.
etc., etc.,
Right.
and you also have the portability plan.
Yes,
And
in
last
place.
but not the least, recently the involvement, the addition of mental health
Right.
is a
That's a
big
great
step.
step. Right, sir.
Because that's a very large populace, and this number is going to go up. At the present moment, of course, very few mental disease patients get admitted, and majority of our policies are inpatient policies.
Thank
But the
you.
fact of the matter is that we are moving in the right direction. As long as the intentions are right, I think we will see daylight soon.
Thank you, Dr. Puri, for joining this seminar. Would have loved to have you live on there, but anyway, thank you so much, Dr. Puri, for joining this webinar.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I have a question from Suvasis Barua. He is from Bangladesh. He asks, in a country like Bangladesh, where primary health care is provided by community health clinics, which has been very successful over the years, how that medical system be prepared to face pandemic like COVID-19 through insurance mechanism? I think both Mr. Sanjay Datta and Dr. Jain can reply this question.
Yeah, Rishad, you can go first.
Yeah. So I think that, see, the challenge in these kind of situation is to link insurance with primary health care. So what happens right now, for example, that through the community primary health care is already being provided. And that's where I think you have these community health clinics and all which are there. And that they can be the front line or the first port of call. But once there, either the screening is done or referral is done from there, you need to link up with a higher level system where insurance can play a very active role. And that's where I think that this can be linked between inpatient insurance and primary health care. Or if the insurance has a comprehensive package, then even primary health care be a part of that package. And that is there in many countries. But in Bangladesh, I don't think that is the case right now. Where I think that these community health clinics are outside the insurance purview presently.
I would agree with that. That's, I think, a similar evolution which is happening with insurance industry. I think a lot of primary outpatient care is not integrated into our products in terms of insurance coverage. We're allowing for that. Let's say a lot of Western countries, they are seamless. There is no difference. You can go for outpatient primary care, and that it's all covered within the same sum insured. Here we do have some pockets of outpatient coverage, but those are sublimited. So I one important issue I think Ayushman may lead that entire effort is to integrate all of it and make it seamless. The reason I would advocate that and to bring in another point which got discussed earlier on fragmented care. One of the key kind of drivers of uniting, trying to get fragmented care together, apart from some government initiative, is always the payers. They have to, through their products, be able to find a way to integrate that. The reason why I'm saying this, while that's healthcare, is that just take for example, we are hearing instances of small nursing homes where their footfalls and elective surgeries and other ailments are just falling down. Let's take this particular COVID experience. A lot of OPDs are shut, so and they are not able to then operate. They are finding huge cash flow challenges. Now, if we were able to through the coverages with government help and with ours, our coverages being very seamless, those capacities could be utilized. They could be paid for, through the insurance mechanism or other government mechanisms where both the things are integrated and paid for. So it's very imperative that we get this, seamless coverage going as we go forward, both in Bangladesh and in India.
There is another question coming which says from Sefali Sonpa. Says that what is the reinsurance position on honoring COVID claims? Given IRD has made it mandatory to cover this risk, is the directive also passed on to reinsurance? Mr. Datta?
Yeah. So there are two parts to it. As far as health insurance is concerned, the idea is very clear, and the products which are meant to cover health insurance, healthcare access cannot exclude, pandemic things. Even if few companies may have had it, but it's very clear now that they cannot exclude once a pandemic is declared. Every admission into a hospital will be taken care of, and I think that's the same stance which we've taken as far as Indian reinsurers is concerned, as well as ones who are operating out of in India. Insofar as contractual relationship between Indian healthcare insurance players and their overseas reinsurers who are not part of the Indian ecosystem and the regulatory authorities supervision, then it's more a contractual issue in terms of how much is covered and whether it's reinsured, and if it's reinsured, whether pandemic is excluded or not.
Okay, there is another question which
Abhijit, I would like to add my 2 bits
Yes.
on the primary care integration.
Right, sir.
See, there are a lot of primary care physicians who are willing to work within standard treatment guidelines. Today, the insurance companies, the largest lament is that doctors are not working within standard treatment guidelines and the bills are going haywire. So an attempt should be made, maybe in a small geographic area, to link a primary care physician, a mid-level hospital, a tertiary care hospital, where the insured person can be subjected to, and the insurance company can be sure of prefixed standard treatment guideline treatment being given.
Dr. Asrari, the problem with the standard treatment guidelines are there are multiple standard treatment guidelines. So which standard treatment guidelines? Ayushman Bharat has its own guidelines. They are in the course of...
No, sir, I'll tell you what, Government of India today has treatment guidelines for all the infections, malaria, dengue, everything. If we follow that, we can be sure our patients do not die of dengue. So what I'm saying, wherever Government of India has a guideline, we
Right.
follow that for acute ailment. For chronic ailments, we have American Diabetic Associations, we have JNC 8 for hypertension. So once, a consensus can be made, and this is by choice, the doctor has to agree to this, period.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. I have a question which often I comes, that health insurance in India today does not touch all segments. It's a fit in all health insurance policy, barring of course of late some disease related policies have come. One policy we are trying to sell it to entire segments. Look at the problem. Geriatric healthcare needs are very, very different. Their health preferences are very different. As on date, we do not have a policy which is targeted at geriatric healthcare needs. We have a medical policy which is extended to senior citizens, but that's more or less the same policy. Geriatric healthcare needs are very, very different. And maybe they don't require hospitals at most of the level. Most of the time, they require home care, they require palliative care, they require other kind of care. So it's a health insurance industry looking at to address the needs of geriatric health at the moment. Is there any plan on the annual, Mr. Datta?
So you're right. There has been no separate carve-out thought process on being able to isolate products which are only geriatrics, specific, care. That's for two reasons. One, of course, way the demographic, positioning of India, goes. So we are trying to now address underpenetration to more and more to people who are in a different age bracket. The other one is, of course, for us to be able to create that thing, we need to have enough a pool of paying people who can come together to be able to support a product, which is extremely different. You are absolutely right. It is extremely different from a curative-led product which we currently have. It would all require elements of the healthcare sector itself to be able to get up to a lot of home care, assisted care, and all of that. Which also, given the nature of what was talked about earlier, our healthcare system is also curative-led to an extent, and maybe taking some cues from Dr. Nishant and Dr. Asrani in terms of how it can be integrated first, and more important, the kind of standards where people who take care of the of the geriatric thing, patients get very well established. A different set of people can be there to monitor them if they require a lot of even some sort of support, which is semi-hospital like, at the home, which brings down the cost of treatment for the geriatric case, but the quality of treatment does not drop in terms of the interventions which are required to help them have, let's say, a post-surgery kind of interventions, or a kind of continuous monitoring of their health status. All those kind of things can be managed at home, and that's where I think care also needs to evolve to be able to cater to that segment of the population. Maybe all of this will evolve as we bring down our focus on infectious disease, allocate that element of things to people who need continuous care for these for geriatric related ailments. That's something ahead of us. You are right. Insurance products have not been geared for that, but I think it will also follow the development on the healthcare side.
I have 8% of India's total population is a geriatric population. And fortunately, that population also has paying capacity. What they are not getting is the right kind of care. I would like to ask Dr. Nishant Jain, do you think home cares and subacute cares have future in India? Can they be embedded and integrated into health delivery mechanism?
See, if you see developed countries, it's already there, and there are a lot of developed countries where they are providing these kind of care, and they have been very successful also. And when you do that, you also reduces the load on the hospital, and many times you also reduces chance of hospital acquired infection and things like that. However, at the same time in India, this is something which, at least from the government side, government is not able to fund these kind of initiatives. Its government is more focused on funding right now with their limited resources on the hospital-based hospital-based interventions. However, I think that as the industry is growing and as we are also evolving in terms of our understanding and our experience, there will be an opening and there will be an opportunity to go towards that direction also. And I'm quite sure that in next few years we'll see more experiments in this direction, because even from the insurance industry perspective, that may be more cost effective actually, if you see it in a different way. But at the same time, the chances of abuse and the chances of misusing it becomes very high. So how do you balance between chances of abuse and controlling cost vis-a-vis using these kind of new things? And that's where I think technology and all may play a much important role in future, and certainly we can also learn from what is being done in other countries.
Just to add here, on Nishant's point, just as a matter of small interest, the Mediclaim policy which you talk of had, the section called domiciliary hospitalization. Because it got abused, whatever, it was removed, for a long time. And the whole idea was that, you can't really, there were no standards of care, and how do you pay for domiciliary hospitalization? And, exactly to that point, there will be a time when I have to, segregate a lot of care into homes, and where standards are set for that. And once it is set for that, I think we would be able to, devise products which would cater to that level. So there was already a thought around domiciliary hospitalization long back, and I think we should revive that coverage. That will go a long way towards providing not only coverage during for geriatric care and such other interventions, but also most importantly, in times of infection, when we run out of capacity at the hospital, we need to treat patients even at homes. I hear of a lot of cases in the Western world, where because of lack of capacity or people fearing to go with COVID symptoms to the hospitals for treatment, a lot of it is being set up at home to be able to deliver care at the home. So even in infections of pandemic variety, home care becomes extremely crucial. Our ability to be able to gear up for that and have institutions which are able to back it is going to be extremely important. Coverage will follow.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I will now request Dr. Rakesh Agarwal. I have some slides to show to the audience. Rakeshji, if you hear me,
Yeah.
if you can show. Right. If you look at this particular slides, life expectancy at birth, you find Bangladesh is doing far better than India. It's 72.7. India is only 68.8 years. If you look at Thailand is doing extremely well, 75. Sri Lanka is doing extremely fine. If you look at healthy life expectancy at birth, there also I find Sri Lanka and Bangladesh which is doing far better. India is only 59.3 years, Bangladesh is 63.3 years, Sri Lanka is 66.8, so is 66.8. My question to Dr. Nissan Jain, because you have been working in Southeast Asia, what exactly Bangladesh does? They do not have a great tertiary care. Their secondary care is also not. For tertiary care, they either go to India or they come to Malaysia or other countries. But still, when it comes to health indicators, they have been very, very successful. And that possibly gives an indication that time has come. India should go back to preventive and primary care, address that, and start building primary care and learn lessons from country like Bangladesh. Since you have been associated with all these countries, can you throw some light how Bangladesh and the Thailand in particular doing? Thailand has great universal healthcare, doing so well in healthcare, in addressing healthcare problems.
Yeah, thanks, Avijit. I think, this is a statistic which is often discussed even in academic circles and in many places, that Bangladesh is doing, for example, much better in terms of many health indicator, even though out of pocket still is very high there. However, in terms of indicator and many things like life expectancy and all, it's doing much better than India. And that's where I think the role of primary care, I think personally, becomes very important, because the primary care in Bangladesh, there's a lot of emphasis there. So even though for secondary and tertiary, many times even in fact a lot of people from there come to India, but for primary care they have created a system where not only government, but there were many non-government organizations also, like BRAC and all, which have a huge presence there, and there are community health clinics also. So they are doing quite a lot. In India, for a long time, primary health care was focused more on maternal and child health only, and primarily. And then, as you move up, you start getting more better care. And from the past many years, that was the case. And that's where I think that we needed to expand our primary care envelope to cover for a lot of things. Like, for example, in Thailand, when they had their UHC reform, it was not only reform at the inpatient level, the larger reform was made at the primary care level, where a lot of emphasis went, a lot of money went, and a lot of ideas went there, and they created this whole continuum of care approach. In India, that was something which was unfortunately missing. Theoretically, it was there. Theoretically, you can go to any primary health care center and you should be able to get primary health care. But in reality, it was more focused only on few things. So now, with the Ayushman Bharat, Government of India has started this health and wellness center idea, where there's this plan that it becomes a one-stop shop for all the primary care related initiatives, which not only reproductive and child health, but it also talked about mental health. It also talks about screening for NCDs, because as the disease pattern is changing, we have to evolve with that. And though health and wellness center have evolved, and there already we think that 30,000-40,000 health and wellness center have been set up, but it's early days. We need to see it more critically, that how they are performing, how actually they are able to serve the purpose, and if there are any gaps, how they can be filled. Because as Dr. Asrani mentioned a bit earlier, that in India always at every level the focus was a doctor-centric care. And that is something in India because of the size and because of the availability of doctors and all, we need to also look at examples from other countries like Turkey, like Thailand, where they have gone beyond doctor-centric care and where paramedical staff has become very important. And that is where I think that we need to also learn from those things and maybe go towards a model where it's not necessary that for every small thing you need a doctor, and some things can be taken care of at a different level itself. So
Right.
yes, certainly we can learn from these countries and any of the country where they are performing better than us.
Okay. Dr. Agrawal, I don't need the slides again. I move ask this question to. No, please. I don't require anymore. This. I move to ask this question as a popular question coming to me for Mr. Sanjay Datta. I look at. I tell you the scenario why health insurance is not catching up the fancy of common people. There is a professor who writes to me that he has health insurance policy for 10 years. He did not take any claim. And all of a sudden, he became 65 or 66. And all of a sudden, he found that his health insurance premium has gone up tenfold more. So what he was paying, it was 10 times more, so 5 times more than what he was paying. Now the question is, why is such thing happening? Are you not looking at the health behavior of the person? Or age is the only determinant through which health policies are underwritten? Don't you think health behavior is most important?
Of course it is. There's no doubting the fact. I'll tell you how, this, issue that, something which is very surprising has evolved. Why would premiums jump at a certain, as we go up? There are two reasons for that, and you have to understand the way health insurance, insurance pools operate. As the age group goes up, Indians, the way Indian insurance started, it was all kind of started towards trying to have people who were younger, which is basically 45 and below. The entire drive for penetration started around that. Then it moved up that particular scale, and then people were restricting their products till 65. After that, I think that's where regulatorily also I'm supposed to take in a new guy at 65. So that was the kind of benchmark on which products got developed. Then the insurer, the regulator came in somewhere down the line and said, fine, you need to have lifelong renewability, which is a feature of our product in this market. It's a very good consumer-centric feature. Now, with having focused on people who are 35, 45 and all, for their ability, the entire group of people who would reach 65 would take some time. So what you have there at the age of 65, the population there is very small. And anybody who has, the frequency of incidence is not very high. But what happens is, at that age, if something happens, it's a pretty severe incident in terms of access to healthcare. And all with the low population at that age group and the the severity of the illnesses which afflict this group, then for the group the premium goes up significantly. That is one particular reason. But also, having said that, the Indian market is trying to evolve. One of the reasons could be in that particular company, I'm not too sure of. The age band on which premium shifts happen also tend to be very, very big, 5 year, 10 year and all that. Most of the insurers are now moving to yearly age bands, shifts, so that the, jump is not so severe, that you feel, the impact of it. Last but not the least, just to, understand this, you are absolutely right. Going back to the behavioral thing, we have to look at the good risks and the bad risks, very differently. We tend to subsidize the good and the bad. So we'll have to look at, the behavioral side. People who didn't claim are keeping very healthy. Their biological age could be very, very different from their chronological age, and we need to treat them differently as a risk, health risk. Those are areas which we need to move forward, and that will only happen if we integrate all forms of care, which is outpatient primary care, into that. Our understanding of the risk will go up, rather than just insuring one and just understanding a risk through one particular event in your life when you need hospitalization. It's a very remote way of understanding the behavior of this.
I have questions coming from Bangladesh. One is AMZ Azim asking, there is a demand now in Bangladesh for COVID coverage both for health and life, but no reinsurance support is available for high risk. how this opportunity can be explored. And in the same vein, Rama Dahal from Nepal is saying, in Nepal, insurance regulator has made it mandatory to cover COVID-19 health insurance with 20% obligatory session. And this is what coming from Nepal. And balance is pooled between all general insurance companies. This is what. How will you react to this, Mr. Datta?
It's an interesting thought. Reinsurance coverage, I think, is important for giving coverage for COVID kind of situations. You must understand very clearly that in terms of when you do normal, all the other diseases and all that, insurers over a period of time, even in India, forget others. We've started developing a lot of understanding through data analysis, analytics, actuarial science, and all of that. But we are dealing with a pandemic in terms of the frequency and the severity of its impact. We do not have. We are not in the area of risk. We're when you try to model it, we're in the area of uncertainty. Once you're in the area of uncertainty, very little the models work. That when we'll be seeing how models keep coming up and keep failing. So because of that issue, I think coverage, reinsurers tend to be very cagey on trying to provide coverage on COVID situations. Having said that, I think we've had a fairly good understanding this time. The world is starting to look at coverage of COVID-like situations. We are getting a hang around of the model and the kind of requirement of the products are concerned. And I'm sure down the line, I think we will, they will be able to source reinsurance coverage. And of course, I'm sure if they interact with the local regional pools, including GIC, reinsurance would start becoming available for that.
There is
Abhijit, I will add here.
Yes, sir.
Several insurers in India are coming out with COVID-specific policies,
Right.
which are fixed benefit policies. They would pay a certain amount, percentage of the policy sum assured, either at diagnosis or at hospitalization or at demise or for treatment. So there are insurers looking at it. So it is happening in India, at least, COVID-specific policies.
Yeah, it's happening. I think you're absolutely right. But there have been requests for coverage from international markets, let's say Africa and all, for us to reinsure them. But we have been able to launch it only in India for a limited basis. We do not have the capacity to model and be able to provide reinsurance coverage.
That's right.
To that extent, it's just an attempt for us. We've also ourselves, as a company, launched a COVID-only benefit product. But it's nothing, huge or nothing, big. Our big coverages come out of our normal, regular indemnity products, which have been there for long.
Another question is that many people ask me, why is health insurance not going rural areas of capacity to pay? There is demand. Even my own PhD work, I could find out that there is huge demand in rural areas, but there is a supply side problem. And they say that health insurance is all about cherry picking. They go to the metropolis, 2-tier and 3-tier cities. Beyond that, they are not going. And Dr. Jain, you have also worked in microinsurance, have been working in microinsurance area. There is a lot of scope for microinsurance to grow in India. Look at Bangladesh. There is no regulation support. Their IDRA doesn't support it. We have a very strong microinsurance support in India from the regulator. Still, we are not going to the rural areas. What could be the reason? Why health insurance not going to the rural areas?
See, I think we'll have to break it down into few elements there. So,
Right.
for example, the government-supported schemes are already predominantly rural schemes. So, Ayushman Bharat and the state government schemes, they are covering people, and because of the data-related issues, anyway, urban data is not so great. So, largely the beneficiary of these schemes are rural. So, for example, I will say that even in Ayushman Bharat, out of 50 crore beneficiaries which are there, roughly 40 crore odd would be in the rural areas. However, you are absolutely right that there is a big segment even within the rural areas that has capacity to pay, and they can actually pay some premium and they can get covered. But right now they are not covered because the penetration there is lesser. However, I feel that now slowly and slowly this is becoming an attractive area, because the problem in India is that insurance as a concept is something which people have still not understood as much as in many other places. So people always feel that, what will happen if I pay 1,000 rupee, and if I don't get sick, will I get it back? These as simple questions like this, and then you have to then explain that what is insurance is a pooling of risk, and they don't always understand. In fact, I remember that in the early days when we used to go to the field and talk somebody, then he will say, why do I need health insurance? I have a son who will take care of me. So those kind of ideas were there often. And also, so when you explain somebody that, one of the micro insurer person told me a nice thing, that, when we used to go and say to the family that, why don't you pay 500 rupees? They will say that, what will happen if I don't get sick? But then we ask the question that in 10 years you will pay 500, which means you will pay 5,000. Will you get sick in 10 years? He said, yeah, I may get sick in 10 years. And then said, if you are sick, will you spend more than 5,000 or less? Then they say, I may need more actually. So the problem here is that people, the financial literacy and the insurance literacy also is something where a lot of effort needs to happen. I think regulator has started making a lot of efforts now. At least you see advertisements in these regards and all, but it was not there earlier. So I feel that to penetrate more amongst the informal non-poor workers is something where a lot of effort will go. And in fact, government is talking about all this missing middle right now, that in the health insurance market, the top are covered, the bottom are covered, but the middle is not covered, whether that middle is in rural or urban. And that is where, how do you bring them in? And there have been not too many successful examples across the world where you have been able to collect premium from informal workers in a large extent in a big country. And that is where we have to be more innovative, because people have money, and right now they're paying at the hospital, which is the worst way to pay, because you pay at the time of the treatment and you're most vulnerable. You will have to pay whatever people ask you and all. But if there is a pooling in advance, it's much better. But how do you do it? And you have to learn not only from international example, but also from Indian experience and jugaad technique or innovation, whatever we can call it, because we'll have to find local solutions for that.
Thank you.
So I'd just like to add to that, the green shoots already in terms of the fact that, one of the key areas is not, distribution, going and influencing awareness, reach. A lot of times our distribution has been, city-oriented distribution of health insurance. Now, they've done two things. So one is the regulators has, allowed POS, which means the agency force, can be for certain up to a certain level of sum insured products. The agent force can be immediately licensed. A point of sale kind of licensing, where the number of hours of training and all that has been drastically reduced. That's one. CSCs have now been allowed to go and sell these kind of products. Just now, for information everyone, and people can go to the website and study it. Common health insurance product across all companies in India selling health insurance has been kind of launched from 1st April. The wordings are common, just like a motor policy in India. The pricing is different. I personally believe, as it goes forward, this kind of policy will also evolve towards being much more rural driven in terms of the way it is sold, because it gives sum insured up to 5 lakh, just like the Arogyasri product. But unlike that, what is important for us as a country is to be able to have your own health insurance which you can pay for, because the whole idea is that you're going to access healthcare. Your need to access healthcare will evolve as you grow. Your income level grows and your life grows. What a retail health insurance does is it gives you lifetime renewability. And unlike any other government scheme, it depends on the government subsidy being there and all that. So it works for a certain segment of the population. As you are able to self-pay, it's also important to have your own health insurance coverage, and which is where I think products will evolve. And of course, it will get segmented into various kind of segments. It could be location specific, zonal specific, age specific. All of that will come in, and it also would include a little bit of substandard risks, which we tend to avoid at this point of time, but we'll slowly get pulled into this particular.
One question is
to add a point here, Professor Abhijit. One more thing we have to address is under insurance. People have insurance, but very small amount. So they think they have a 2 lakh insurance, they go in a hospital, they're stuck midway. And that is the reason medical bankruptcy is much more common than pure financial bankruptcy. Please go ahead.
Right. There is a question from Dr. Binod Jain. What kind of frauds are expected post-lockdown open, and how technology will help in detecting them and resolving the same? Dr. Asrani, you have been on the forefront of fraud management.
See, whenever there is an economic downturn, frauds have gone up. It happened in 2008 and 9. It happened post demonetization when people had no cash. The fraud occurs more in the segment of accident policies and critical illness. In life, there may be some amount of hard fraud that without the person dying, they can create documents to show that the person is dead. Or in the health insurance segment, now see, a post-COVID era, there's going to be a run on health insurance new policies. Most of them are expecting a windfall, get claims in the very short period. So these frauds will rise. The companies today are working at the platform of running analytics on proposal forms as well as post-issuance data, identifying the ones where they need to manually go and check in. So the mixture of technology and human intervention will help manage these frauds.
Just to give you a small example, we have launched this COVID-only benefit product, which is just based on COVID testing done and you're being declared COVID positive. Even there, there is, one or two cases of somebody, I think doctoring the COVID positive result. So, it's we're constantly at work, trying to make sure that the good patients, in our pool, good risks or the good policyholders do not pay for such frauds.
One question is coming from Dr. Madhu Acharya from Glasgow, Caledonia University, UK. And his question is there any specific clause in the general insurance policies in India other than the health insurance to cover the business interruption, including employee health due to infectious disease? If so, how popular they are?
Unfortunately, for business interruption in India, there is only business interruption in India gets triggered only with a physical damage. So a flood, affecting a factory or its employees, those are the things. So our market is a damage market business interruption. We do not have a coverage for non-damage business interruption. So the pandemic is one where it affects business from a non-damage. There is no physical damage to the factory. There could be stoppages. Those stoppages are not paid for in our policies. Our market is not developed to have this kind of sophisticated covers. But having said that, even our workers' compensation policies are not geared to that. It caters for accidents. It doesn't cater for sicknesses. Tends not to be covered. Most of our public liability policies also rules out bodily injury and sickness. So those are the coverages which are not there in our market. But having said that, there has been one positive step. The government has kind of mandated that all the businesses of a certain size who ones like Dr. Nishan talked about ESIC and others would need to take health insurance for their workers. That's a very, very positive step. It will kind of, at least for the smaller companies, they have to take make sure that not only do they form the adhere to the norms of sanitization and social distancing, which is being implemented across the country, but also in the case that somebody needs help, they would need to have health insurance which triggers to be able to take care of the workers. So it's become mandatory. A lot of the companies are reaching out and taking such covers.
I will take two more questions. One is coming from Satyajit Ray. What are the three gray areas, which particularly the health segment, which needs to be prioritized post-pandemic, as huge expectations are on the wanting list? Three areas which will be prioritized as far as health insurance or health segment is concerned? Yes.
I will take health segment.
Yes.
The disaster management plan, wherever it is present, does not cover the disaster management at grassroots level. Now, in this time of COVID, when the government kept telling that do not run to hospitals for smaller ailments, there were no primary care clinics available.
Right, sir.
The primary care, Nishant, whenever we talk of primary care in this country, we are only talking of primary healthcare centers, not realizing that a large number of primary care is in private sector, and most of the daily wage earners also go to private doctors because they can't afford half a day waiting in the queue. So the primary sector, the primary health care has to be made robust. The diagnosis, the education, of course, sanitation and all will happen, but primary care, I think, needs to be made very strong if we need to fight a similar pandemic in future.
Another interesting question coming from Qazi Ali. In the lockdown situation, people cannot go to doctors. Therefore, telemedicine service is required. Can we include this service in health insurance? What is the prospect of telemedicine or teleconsultation? Do we, Mr. Datta, include that in
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, this is one big change which will happen. I was just, looking at how even critical care has evolved in some of the best hospitals in New York and other places. A lot of specialists are now not going near the patient. They are even sitting in hospitals in their rooms. They are getting a lot of lively feed of the patient. They're able to maneuver with some nurse or paramedic being very close to the, they are using some form of technology to even interact with the patient. And so the idea is to be able to use a lot of things remotely. Even now, contactless world is something which we face. Healthcare workers also need to be safe. Given that perspective, telemedicine becomes all the more important. There will be of course issues in terms of how much care can you prescribe to telemedicine, how much can you diagnose. I think it will evolve. That's one big area of evolution. We as insurers, through some of our outpatient products, we have already started promoting it in a big way. We pay for it. We also have services which we offer free to our customers. And my guess is that this is one big change. Remote sensing technology in terms of being able to carry a lot of images, medical images, would kind of basically drive this whole change towards being able to move towards a diagnosis, which is as powerful as a diagnosis with someone being face to face with the patient. A mixture of like what Dr. Sani talked about. A lot of people who could be absolutely are trained but may not be MBBS, but be trained, but nurses and others administering those things and being able to use a lot of remote specialist care will become very, very important. Hospitals have understood that if they need to treat infection, they need to isolate their big specialists and their wards and all that. Otherwise, they'll get shut down. So I think this will be a big jump. We as insurers will definitely support it.
Yeah, I think
Abhijit, on telemedicine, actually, I think COVID will result in a big fillip to telemedicine. I can tell you that. Because what has happened because now, in fact, you will see all the major hospitals in India have started now their telemedicine thing during COVID. And I think this will continue. Government of India is coming out with a huge telemedicine platform where already guidelines have been prepared and all, where it will be either it is already being piloted in few states and will be launched very soon, where it will have capacity to do telemedicine, thousands, maybe lakhs of telemedicine consultations every day. And private sector also is trying to set up a similar platform. So I think that telemedicine can become a very important tool, but of course it has its limitation, but it will be much bigger player in the future than what is in the past. And I think COVID can be attributed as a maybe trigger for that, as a catalyst for that.
What about teleconsultation? Is that also going to come in a big way?
Yeah. Yes, both I'm saying. Telemedicine, teleconsultation.
The teleconsultation, okay, that's it.
Just to add to that, teleconsultation will be extremely important because a lot of our health insurance products are now covered mental illnesses also. Okay. So a lot of the mental illnesses will not be can be treated through inpatient care. A lot of it will be treated through teleconsultation, and that's one big area of growth which I foresee.
Okay. Last 1 month, I've been giving teleconsultations. and prescriptions are being honored by the chemist. And most of my colleagues are doing teleconsultation.
Oh, that's great. Okay. One last question I'll ask to everybody and then possibly conclude today's session. This is coming from Hemant S. Angadi. He asks, can this pandemic bring a new wave for market penetration for health insurance companies? Could you get the question?
Yeah, I'll give you a small data point. I'll go first, and I'll ask each of my panelists to conclude with their own views. I'll give you a small data point. This was lockdown, and this was we had apprehensions that the health renewals would not take place because of lockdown and other issues. The government, in fact, went out of its way and said that we would allow renewal of policy so that there is no break in insurance till after the lockdown. They gave a very, very special provision. In spite of that, I was just checking today morning with a lot of our agents. Everybody's got 100% health renewal. When I checked with them on motor insurance was low. Now renewals were not happening, and were difficult and all of that. I think awareness has moved very strongly. Our health insurance renewals used to be normal basis 85%, just touched 100%. So that's a small data point. I just wanted to also say that in terms of awareness, one of the reasons we launched this COVID insurance products, COVID specific product, is to build awareness. I think the risk perception amongst the public in terms of not only in terms of vulnerability, but also the requirement for healthcare access, which could be range from mild to severe in terms of their state of health, which requires very critical support. I think the entire gamut of things, nowhere has public consciousness gone up so much, and I think this could be the beginning of a change in the way the health insurance is has penetrated in India. Or it will also begin a change in coverage, as Dr. Nishan was talking about, integrating the whole coverage spectrum. And last but not the least, there would also be a huge amount of linkage with the with the healthcare system in terms of not only data which we get from them, the quality of the data, the electronic health records and all that. More and more people are now amenable to come out and give that data, because there's no regulator in healthcare per se. But also the fact that there is also a common ground in terms of treatment protocols and kind of affordable costs would get strengthened as we go forward. That would lead to affordable health insurance premium.
Your views, Dr. Jain, if you could quickly.
I think that certainly this pandemic will result in more penetration for health insurance. As Sanjay mentioned, I certainly agree with his thoughts, and it was interesting to know that data point which he mentioned. And I also feel that the whole health systems, not only in India but across the world, people are looking more closely, because this pandemic has opened a lot of fault lines also into our system, into the way we conduct healthcare, the way we fund healthcare. And I think that this is a big shock, because not only for COVID, but how we dealt with it, but also for future, that anything which happens in the health system, I think that the whole health system needs to be rethinked, in the sense of an health insurance is a critical part of it. And I feel that this is an opportunity for us actually to see that what we are doing which is good, what we are doing which needs to be improved, and health insurance will get a big fillip out of this shock.
Yes, Dr. Sudari, if you can sign.
See, COVID has been an unprecedented leveler. People have been brought to one level. Insurance, when we would ask our patients, insurance le lo, it was being considered like going to temples. Sir, abhi kya jarurat hai? 50 years honge to le lenge. Now they have realized, and although the deaths are more in elderly age group, the people afflicted are more in 25 to 40. So I am already getting calls from a patient which company to take from. So I am sure health insurance penetration will be huge. But yes, fraud also has to be taken care of.
Right. Thank you. And if we sum up the whole issue, is that the health system needs to be moving around preventive and primary healthcare, essentially. Possibly then other cares can be built upon. Health insurance is likely to go up. The penetration of health insurance will grow because of this pandemic problem, kind of new wave, the way people will react to the future healthcare needs. That's something needs to be looked at. But certainly good days for health insurance. Before I thank all the distinguished panel members, Mr. Sanjay Datta, Dr. Nishant Jain, Dr. Asrani, and Dr. Narottam Puri, I will I like to extend my thanks to Risk Management Association of India. I am from day one associated with it. I remember those days when I used to go to Calcutta to visit Dr. Rakesh's house and in Girish Park, and I would meet his father, who in fact started, their entire family is a family of chartered accountants. And his father would say, why we don't have our own risk management association? In those days, I thought maybe it's a distant dream, but somehow or the other, that distant dream has come to true. My sincere thanks to Mr. Ram Gopal Agarwal. His sector is more than 70 years old, but still his enthusiasm is matchless. The way he takes things forward, that's matchless. So my sincere thanks to Risk Management Association of India for giving this opportunity to conduct this webinar. Thanks to plenty of viewers I could notice from Bangladesh, Nepal, UK, US, even from Dubai, I found some have joined. So that's great to see so many viewers joining this webinar. Thanks once again to all the distinguished panelists. Look forward to many more webinars in days to come. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
everyone for a
Thank you,
wonderful
Rakesh.
session.
Yeah.
And thank you, Professor,
Thank you, everybody.
for a wonderful session. So hopefully we will meet again. Tomorrow we have a session on life insurance.
Life insurance.
So again, you can join tomorrow at 4 o'clock. So
Thank
see you
you.
again. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.